Please let's welcome Dr. Mahendra P. Lama.
Thank you very much, Dr. Thomas Salavar, chair of this session, and Professor Jae-Sean Lee, Secretary General, Yoo Chung Academy, and very distinguished panelists today and very distinguished guests, audience. I'm going to briefly take you to my own region, that is South Asia, where you have India as the core, then quite a few countries, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, Maldives, as India's core neighborhood, and of course China on the north. And when we see this region and when we really analyze why conflict, war, and instability in this very, very important region is something related to two factors. One is what you call national security, and the other is human security. And whenever we talk about national security, it really impinges upon trans-border issues, transnational issues, that is fairly at an international level. And whenever you talk about human security, it really impinges upon of issues that are within the country, within a cultural ecology, and to a large extent within a community also. So all these conflicts, wars, and instabilities in that particular geography are primarily created by what you call national insecurity. And national insecurity would relate to military one-upmanship, ideology, borders, natural resources, superpower rivalry, global disorder, and the heart of it is what you call interplay of national interest and national power. That's what we have seen, because we have seen all kinds of conflict in that particular geography, except the nuclear war. You name any conflict in the world, you will find in that particular geography. On the other hand, if you really look into human insecurities, you will find the basis for violence, the basis for instability and conflict is basically emanates from issues related to poverty, inequality, food insecurity, environmental dislocations, political and human rights violations, deprivations, all kinds of things. So the question here is, how do you really address one, a situation essentially created by national insecurity dynamics, and the other one, human insecurity issues. You have two approaches very clearly, right? First approach is a hard power approach, where you resort to violence to really deal with these situations. That means you are trying to deal with the situations with deepened destructions, with much larger dislocations, ultimately to bring about a situation of order and peace. The other way to deal with this situation is to win the hearts of the rivals, right? The conflict actors here, and that is a soft power approach. You use soft power, right? You can use education, you can use issues related to environmental security, you can use food, you can use culture, you can use a variety of soft powers. And whenever we have used soft powers, the peace and the order have been lasting, sustained. And whenever we have used hard power, it has never been so. We have also found that in case of soft power, in the entire dynamics, we have found that in case of soft power, there is hardly any price to pay for it. In case of hard power, exorbitant price, right? Because the hard power actually propagates self-existence, right? It is one-upmanship again. And actually the soft power really talks about to create to harmonize and to coexist. And you have a country like India, which is very famous for soft power, use of soft power, Nepal, Bhutan, to a large extent, even a country like Sri Lanka. There's a new phenomenon at the global world that is really affecting South Asia region also. A phenomenon where institutions built at the global level to bring peace, stability, phenomenon that where the institutions build actually to bring equality, right? Reduce discontentments, reduce poverty, they are actually fledgling today. They are largely eroding in your approaches. You can see Bretton Woods institutions, including the IMF and the World Bank. You can see the United Nations organizations. You can see the World Trade Organization. And the erosion in the values, erosion in the practices of the global practices of these institutions have sanitary effects on these countries in that particular region. And you have find even regionalism process that was celebrated globally has drastically eroded in the entire situations. Therefore, as a university teacher, when I bring the realist paradigm, the liberal paradigm, and the constructivist school, I think no theory actually fits into what is happening in South Asia today. In my own country, look at my own country, the borders. We have a border regime with Nepal and Bhutan, which is regulated under the agreements, Peace and Friendship Treaty with Nepal of 1950, and similar kind of treaty with Bhutan. And we have a country, China, basically undemarcated border scientifically, creating so much of problems, right? We have borders with Bangladesh and Pakistan, which were literally artificially created by some individuals before we got the partitions to happen in these countries. You have Ratcliffe, you have Durand, you have Macron just making the borders. And the moment you made the borders, the same communities remained this side and that side. There was a railway line that really remained fragmented. There was a waterways that was disturbed. There was communities interactions, cross-border interactions that was totally dislocated. And in such a situations, do we really talk about border or we talk about borderland? So we have been discussing why not border is a geometric line. The moment you talk about border as a geometric line, you have national security forces coming into being, and the moment you cross the border, you have national security forces coming into classes. But if you talk about borders, and that is more relevant for my reason, precisely because there was no borders, right? If you talk about a borderland, then you are talking about communities, you are talking about tourism, you are talking about pilgrimages, you are talking about migration, natural resources, dealing with natural disasters in different ways. Therefore, I would say that increasingly, we need to really move from border to borderland, right? Look at a country like Bangladesh. I have an old friend from Bangladesh born before 1947. Before 15th August 1947, he was an Indian, and he suddenly became an East Pakistani. And after a few years again, he became a Bangladeshi. Now he lives in America, so he's an American. So the same gentleman has got 4 nationalities. This is the situation in that particular geography. But again, soft power has really united. I'll give you one example. The music part of it. The famous poet Rabindranath Tagore, he was the one who composed the national anthem of India, Jana Gana Mana. And he is the same poet who composed the national anthem of Bangladesh, Amar Sonar Bangla. And he is the same poet who actually taught a Sri Lankan scholar, Ananda Samarikun, to really compose Sri Lankan national anthem, Sri Lankan Mata. You have an Indian basically an Indian, Nepali speaking Indian going to Nepal and composing the Nepalese national anthem. That is the spirit of soft power. And these were the people who really integrated this region. Therefore, I would say soft power politics is going to be very, very critical. That is where I see Father Moon and Mother Moon playing a very, very critical role as soft power non-state actors in the global world. States can display all kinds of power, overwhelmingly concentrating on what you call the hard powers. But non-state actors like Father Moon and Mother Moon and institutions, they have established, right, UPF would play a very, very, going to be actually in the forefront of global peace, global order, and global stability. I would like to also say that in case of soft power, it is power. Joseph Nye, a very well-known American scholar, calls it power associated with attracting others and getting them to want what you want. It is without destroying the other fellows. So therefore, I would say that soft power has to be increasingly used, and soft power could be used anywhere. Say, for example, the famous Maoist movement in Nepal. Everybody wonders why Maoist movement in Nepal, how Mao came into Nepal, right? And you really look into why not Leninist movement or the Marxist movement, or why not Fidel Castro in their movement. But you will suddenly find that there was some point in the development process of Nepal where Chinese economic assistance came into Nepal in a big way. And in all these economic assistance programs, they distributed Chinese symbols of Mao Zedong, a leopard badge, everywhere, right? And that later on came out to be people mesmerized by Maoist. And I see when I visit China and when I go to Zhuangqian Museum, their private museum, I see all the symbols of Mao Zedong, right? The clock, mirror, bags, mugs, plates, bowls, teapot, jar, all propaganda materials of Chairman Mao. So symbols also bring a major difference in this. International migrations and tourism have become a major instrument of soft power. Today, India and China together would constitute what I say the highest remittance-making countries in the world today, right? One country gets almost $90 billion a day. Indian and Chinese migrants would be all over the world, competing in a country like US, in a country like Australia, even in a country like Japan. And when it really comes to making peace between these countries, I find there's a lot of difference between what they are doing internationally, globally, and what they practice at the regional level. President Xi Jinping, while invoking ancient Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu in his address in Berlin in 2014, he stated, and I quote, "A big country should be like the lower reaches of a river." It means that a big country should be as inclusive as the lower reaches of a river that admit numerous tributaries. China is eager to strengthen dialogue and exchange views with the rest of the world and listen to the voices of other countries with an open and inclusive mind. I hope. And look at my own Prime Minister. Today, my country hosts G20. India has the presidency of G20 today. Our Prime Minister widely is acclaimed as coining this term about one earth, one family, and one future. So I see both the philosophies, strategies, minds of this President of China and Prime Minister of India conversing towards this, right? But why peace does not exist still? Why we are always at loggerheads, despite all these, what you call it, interventions at the global world. Therefore, I would like to conclude by saying that we need to really strengthen public diplomacy. Our diplomacy is largely state-centric, and our instruments are largely orthodox in nature. So in order to really strengthen global peace, regional order, and prevent conflicts in a geography like ours, in a cultural ecology like ours, what we have to do is to really bring non-traditional means of diplomacy. And that is carried forward by public diplomacy, where contributions of, like you all, or contributions actually propagated by Father Wind and Mother Moon would be of tremendous value and of sustainable criticality. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.